Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here with my next Avatar discussion topic video. This one is going to be all about talking about how to develop Mako further. So we've already covered Asami, the Red Lotus members, and Kuvira in this series. And next we have Mako. And I think Mako, obviously, it's more like Asami in terms of, because he is a main character, because he's in all of the books, he has been a focus to a degree. So it's not necessarily a case of just lacking screen time and the writer's not using a character who's only really in one book, like a Red Lotus or Kuvira, where they only really had, 13 episodes to cover those characters. These characters have had basically the entire show to be developed. And where were they used, not used, what were the mistakes that were made? So, like Asami, let's cover what Mako actually gets up to across the 4 books. What are his arcs, and where do they miss the mark, and where do they hit? So, in book 1, Mako's actually used pretty well, because they are setting up the relationship with Korra. So, Mako borderline feels like the secondary main character in a way, because they're teasing the relationship with Korra before he gets into a relationship with Asami, and then once he's in the relationship with Asami, they kind of build up, how Mako feels about Korra to the point where he realizes that he cares about her more than anything. So he has to break up with Asami, and he gets together with Korra right at the end. Along the way, of course, you have the whole pro-bending thing. You have him just becoming kind of part of Team Avatar in a way. Some little issues with Korra along the way with regards to her obviously accusing Hiroshi of working with the Equalists and that being proven correct. You get demonstrated how skilled he is. Like, he's a lightning bender. There's a reason that he's the captain of the Fire Ferrets. That's how skilled he is. And especially in the finale is demonstrated just how powerful of a bender he actually is, when he is the first one to break out of Amon's bloodbending grip. And Amon, just before he's about to take Mako's bending away, before the big Korra airbending moment happens, praises Mako for how talented and powerful of a bender that he is. And that praise, such high praise coming from the character who I consider to be the most powerful non-Avatar bender in the series, Amon, is incredible. And that's one thing with Mako they've always been consistent with, that he is always presented as being a very, very powerful bender. He's a powerful firebender. He can use lightning very easily. He can do lightning redirection. And he's, very agile as well. Plus, he's intelligent. So he has all of the tools in a way that you would say he perhaps isn't full-on prodigy level, but he's that close to being kind of prodigal firebender. But because Amon praises him, you can almost assume that, he is meant to be a prodigy, because the idea is that, Lightning Bolt Zolt was the one who taught him how to, use lightning, and by all accounts, mastered it very early on. So, it does get across how skilled he is, because for him to learn lightning, it would have had to be before, the Republic City Hustle thing, because the Republic City Hustle is more or less the kind of transition point for the brothers between working with the triads and sort of stuff to getting in with Toza and the pro bending stuff. So he learned lightning when he was very young, and because of that, that's definitely one of the biggest things I'd say about the character, that he is so skilled, plus the intelligence that he comes across as being a pretty solid leader of the team. That's why he's the captain of the Fire Ferrets, and at times is the one to sort of present the plan of attack and lead the group. And so while he didn't get the biggest character arc as such, because again it was sort of romance focused for him, just a solid first book for Mako in how he's presented. Book 2 is probably his best as a character, but also, I suppose, the setup for the worst stuff that comes later on. I say it's the best because the arc of him as a detective trying to basically convince everyone that Varric is behind the whole thing ends up being his most kind of substantial plot. And when the reveal comes out that like Bolin obviously finds out that it was Varric behind all of this, it's such a moment for Mako where he is proven right. Lin, Lu, Gon, even the doubts that characters like Bolin and Asami were even having about him, proven completely right that they shouldn't have like just looked past him because he was new and he was a rookie. They should have listened to what he had to say because he is talented. He has an eye for detail and can figure these things out. We saw that early on where he was the one in book 1 to figure out where the Equalist rally was by piecing the posters together, getting across that that's one of his skills, his intelligence. The problem was, of course, at the same time, you also had the romance stuff happen. And I've always liked Mako and Korra's relationship, so it was frustrating to see them only focus on like them arguing once they're together as a couple, even though there's like 6 months where they are together with apparently no problems. So I think the direction of the writing immediately was negative, and borderline I'm like, why did you change the direction so suddenly? Like, you just had them get together, you had the I love you thing, and then you immediately turned it on its head. I thought that was a really silly way to go about things, because it doesn't flow at all and just feels like you just destroyed this relationship here for I don't think very good reasons, and I don't feel they did the breakup particularly well, in that it felt very forced. And then when they had to do like a secondary breakup later on in the finale to actually properly break them up, it just again felt that like, okay, clearly this isn't the direction you want to go in, so go ahead, but this isn't good writing, absolutely. And it's fine, because like ultimately it is a mutual breakup. The way they write it is that Mako and Korra both realize that this is the right thing to do. Fine, cool. They both admit that they still will care about each other, they're still friends, and at this point it's meant to be the case that they are basically best friends. It's meant to set up the ending scene with Mako and Korra in book 4, where she thanks him for his sacrifice, and they basically establish that they are the closest of friends. They will do anything for each other, and that's fine. In the end, I like where they get to with Mako and Korra. It's just very inconsistent how they get there. So after book 2, Mako's kind of gone through both his biggest moment, but also kind of it's left him now at this moment where the writers put him in his lowest moment. And I think it's the start of like book 3 and 4, where they start to make fun of the character, where they start to blame the character for basically all of the relationship stuff that went wrong. That, okay, yes, he broke up with Asami, but as much as it's a sad, upsetting thing, it's one of these things where Asami realizes that Mako didn't care for her as much as Korra. So it's this situation where the characters are meant to be like more understanding of this, yet when it comes to book 3, suddenly Mako is really awkward around Korra and Asami. And I get the Asami thing to a degree. I think Mako, yes, should probably be awkward around Asami because of the way their relationship in book 2 sort of started again, but then stopped without really being clear when either happened. But with Korra, they had a fairly okay breakup, and there's no real clear reason for why there should be this awkwardness beyond the fact that they've just decided that Mako should be awkward. And especially when borderline of the 3 characters at that point, Asami and Korra probably should be the 2 that are the most awkward with each other, because they hadn't had much relationship develop up to that point. And again, it felt a little forced that they just suddenly decided that Korra and Asami are best friends at this point. So you can sort of see the direction that they're going in, where they decide, okay, let's set up Korra and Asami being friends at this point, but basically to make this happen, let's basically just throw Mako to the wolves. Let's make him really awkward and blame him for everything. And again, they do give him something. The arc of him and Bolin discovering their family again, the nice moment of him giving Grandma Yin his scarf, which is obviously her son's scarf, is a very, very nice moment, and them kind of saving the finale towards the end of the book, the family towards the end of the book. That's really cool. Plus the rivalry with him and Ming-Hua over the course of the book, getting across again how strong he is, that he gets captured initially, taken out, but when it comes down to the final battle, he gets the one-on-one victory over Ming-Hua. No question, he gets the victory over her, and she is a character who was able to defeat like Kaya before, and so on. This is a group that were able to defeat like Eska, Desna, and like Zuko and Tonraq before earlier on in the book, and here's Mako dealing with Minghua and then running into the fight that Bolin's having with Ghazan and turning the ties of that fight in the brothers' favour and basically getting them the victory there. That's an exceptionally big win. And it's this weird thing with the character where they always keep him strong and how powerful he is as a bender, but character-wise, they're just all over the place with him. Where he's meant to be the intelligent detective, but he's also super awkward for some reason. And it's never really been massively clear that like that's just an aspect of his character. It just felt like they suddenly decided to have awkward Mako be this kind of big thing that they go for. So that's the end of book 3. And then into book 4, there's the time skip. And I think there's a natural progression for the character where he's promoted in book 2 to be a detective. So over the course of book 3 and then into book 4, he basically rises to the point where he is Lin's right-hand man. That's the impression that I get from the fact that they talk a little bit more. She talks to Mako like an equal, basically, within the police force. He still calls her chief, because of course she is the highest up in the police force, but fundamentally it feels like Mako's borderline second in command. So the setup for like, okay, is Mako going to be the next chief of police, feels like it's basically there. And as much as the whole you have to look after Wu thing is meant to be this kind of terrible mission, it is still a mission that is only given to someone who they believe can actually accomplish that. And so the fact that Mako is deemed worthy enough speaks of his skill, that they trust him to be able to fully protect a VIP like Wu, and he does. As much as it's a terrible mission because of the character that Wu is, it's still a deep security mission that he has to kind of be careful on. I think the problem with it is that because of the character that Wu is, Mako is kind of kept away from anything overly important in book 4 until basically right at the end. Because they have the reunion of Team Avatar and it's not all that much of a focus. I think they sort of missed the mark a little bit on, like, they sort of present it but sort of don't, of Mako being upset that Korra never contacted him. And then when he finds out that Korra actually sent one letter back to Asami, you can tell he's a bit upset at that. Like, why did you contact her but not me? Because, again, like, Korra and Mako are meant to have this connection. They're meant to be super best friends that, okay, they're not in a relationship together romantically, but that they are best friends, that they have this incredible trust and they can rely on each other for everything. So it feels like that's more on Korra. That should be more on Korra about that than Mako. Mako obviously wrote to Korra, but she never wrote back, but did to Asami. And that's why I've always been a little bit weird on highlighting the fact that Korra did that as being a kind of super romantic moment between like Korra and Asami, when it just kind of feels like I actually more interpret it as being the more of like, it's a bit negative that she didn't contact anyone else rather than contacting Asami, who us as the audience at that point have no real insight into why she necessarily chose Asami over everyone else, when the setup is more that Mako is actually technically the one who she should be the quote-unquote closest to. Again, they give him a big moment in the finale where he uses his lightning bending to destroy the core of the Colossus and blow it up. Big moment, like it takes out, that's the moment where the Colossus is destroyed. Mako does that. And he nearly kills himself in the process and is willing to sacrifice himself, but it's Bolin's arc where he comes back and saves his brother, whereas it's always been the case before, even in book 3, where Mako saves Bolin, but here's the reverse. So Mako has someone backing him up, and then of course they end the book with the Korra Mako scene, where she thanks Mako for the sacrifice that he was willing to make and actually did make because he is injured, and they basically both more or less say to each other that we can always rely on each other, that they set up the idea of them being the closest of friends here, that there is a deep connection between the two of them, even if they're not romantic. The problem comes in Turf Wars, again, when they immediately, upon revealing to Mako that Korra and Asami are in a relationship, have him become awkward again. We still don't know the result or why he necessarily feels this way, but just the reaction that we have from Mako is that he is a little bit lost in thought about this, where he's just kind of a bit shocked to hear that they're in a relationship. And it's not necessarily a case where he disagrees with this relationship, but at the same time we don't know yet. They haven't said specifically what issue there is, if there is any. My impression is that I think the way they have to go with it is that they have to just do it where it's just yeah, naturally, he was in a relationship with both of these girls previously. Him suddenly finding out that they're now in a relationship with each other would be a little bit of a shock to him. It's going to take a bit of time to accept that, seeing them together as a couple, but he will accept it. But we haven't got there yet, so there's this fear that because they have sidelined the character in the seasons to a degree, the only consistent thing being them keeping him strong in terms of bending, that they may go down the wrong road with this, and that's always a fear. So let's get into how they should actually go about resolving the character, developing the character going forward, and fixing some of these problems. Immediately, you have to get the scene where Mako, Korra, and Asami talk. I assume it's going to be in Turf Wars Part 3, but I don't know for sure. I think the only way to resolve it is to actually have them have all the action is done in the book, the plots are more or less resolved, you have a chance finally for Mako to talk to Korra and Asami about what's going on. And I think the way you have to do this is not put it all on Mako as he's the one with the problem, why are you freaking out, Mako, do you have a problem with our relationship? That shouldn't be the way this goes. It shouldn't be accusatory towards Mako. This should be a scene of understanding from both sides, that Mako should just be really honest, just put it out there that, look, I actually don't have a problem with you two being in a relationship, but it's going to take some time for me to, come to terms with this in a way, just this is a pretty crazy thing for me to just see suddenly be revealed to me. And the girls, I think, should also be understanding of that as Mako's position, that yeah, they have sort of just kind of sprung this on everyone in a way, and it's different. It's going to take some time for certain characters to accept it, especially Mako, given the connection that the two of them have both had to him. So I think there should be that. And I think with Korra and Mako, I think there should be a sense of they can speak openly to each other because they are meant to be best friends. If there's any awkwardness in it, I actually think the awkwardness probably should come from Asami and Mako, because they have barely had any scenes together in the past 2 seasons. But still, I think you should get across their relationship, and again, just use this scene to just immediately get rid of this awkwardness. Take that part of Mako and just throw it away. It doesn't help the character at all. I'm fine with them having this quirk that Mako in some ways is a little bit of a goofy character on certain things, but something happens and Mako just doesn't talk to people and is really awkward around people. It's not a good character trait, and it doesn't really feel like it's a part of the character that anyone really talks about. It's just something the writers tend to do with him. So I think they need to use this scene to get him past that and just allow him to interact with Korra and Asami normally from here on out, because he hasn't been able in a way to interact with them normally since season 2, borderline since season 1 in some cases, because of how drama focused everything has been. So have him accept their relationship, have them accept that he's, it's going to take a bit of time to accept this, but get past it immediately so we can progress and just see what the friendship between Korra and Mako is like now that they are in this, they'll do anything for each other situation, and Asami and Mako are friends. Move forward. Then where do they go with the character? I think immediately the one thing you have to do is, with the police officer stuff, him being a detective now, emphasize at some point, have a scene between Lin and Mako where she just says to him really openly that, I think you have what it takes to be the next chief. I'm going to be retiring at some point in the next couple of years. I think you have what it takes to take over from me. And really take that relationship, the Lin-Mako relationship, and really mold it into this one where she is setting him up to be the next kind of leader of the police force. And I think that's just a really cool goal of, like, Mako has found the exact position that he wants to be in, that being a police officer, being the chief, he has leadership skills. This makes complete sense for him as a character. And Lin being the one to sort of guide him on to that position makes complete sense as a sort of mentor character on the more kind of police side of things. I think that fulfills a really nice arc from him becoming a police officer in between book 1 and 2 all the way up to like wherever when he actually gets the position of chief of police, if that happens. I think that is a really cool thing to do, and that's going to be a notable moment for the character, for sure. I hope they at some point get around to doing that with him. Similarly, on a police arc type thing, there's always that thing in the air of like, would they ever want to tell the story of Mako and Bolin as well finding the people who killed their parents? Do a Southern Raiders style thing, but with Mako and Bolin, where they have to potentially hunt down the criminals who killed their parents. Mako obviously would be key to this, being the detective, but there'd also be this personal element where Mako, for the most part, tends to be pretty cool-headed. But here's an opportunity to potentially have him borderline go down the revenge road, similar to Katara, and see what she does. And here's an opportunity for, after you've got past all the awkwardness of Korra and Asami, have those two characters be the ones to kind of play the Aang role to a Katara in this sort of situation where Korra has to be the one to save her friend from potentially doing something he would regret, killing the people who killed his parents, and just have him take them in. It may feel a little similar to the Southern Raiders, but because of the different type of character that Mako is, plus you'd have Bolin involved in this as well, I think it would go differently. It would play out differently because it obviously wouldn't be the exact same scenario of basically Zuko and Katara going like ninja mode on it. It'd be more set in Republic City, cop focused, and especially because Mako would be a cop, you know, that would be a thing. Plus potentially Lin wanting to keep Mako away from a case that he'd be personally invested in. I think that is a perfect opportunity to do something big with the character. Present that more kind of emotional side of Mako. Give Bolin a little bit more of a serious arc to go on. I think that would work really, really well. And again, relating to what I said earlier about setting up Mako to be chief of police, I assume the way you do it is that Mako would have the opportunity, he would consider taking revenge, but wouldn't, and would just take the guy in. And it would be this moment where he would prove to Lin in a way that he absolutely has what it takes to be the next chief. This was the opportunity where he could have potentially shown that he wasn't really worthy of the role, but he got it right in the end, and I think that would be really cool to do. The other one is going off a potential, it's like a concept idea that the writers had for book 4. Initially, I think it was a case where book 4 was going to visit the Fire Nation, and there was going to be this subplot where Mako would hit things off with Izumi's daughter, who I believe is meant to more or less be the crown princess of the Fire Nation, and they would start a relationship. I'd really like that, because that's probably the biggest thing in the Korra comics we're waiting for, in terms of like traveling somewhere, is to get to see the Fire Nation in this time period. One of the biggest characters we're waiting to see is, of course, who Izumi's daughter is, because we know she has a daughter. Or at least there's the concept of the daughter exists. I'm not sure if it's been properly confirmed, for sure in universe yet, but it at the very least is something where, like, if they go to exploring the Fire Nation royal family at this point, it would make sense to also have someone else, because Iroh doesn't really feel like a prince. It feels like he is so involved in the military that he borderline isn't part of the royal family anymore, kind of. But they could do it in a weird way where like it does make sense in the end. But that's the impression I get, that whoever Azumi's daughter is, I think Honora is the kind of fan name we've given her just because it makes sense. I'd love to get to know that character, to see, another kind of teenage, I suppose it'd be early 20s though, given where things are now, character, and see what her personality would be like. Because I could imagine her as being like elements of like maybe a little bit of Mei in there, a little bit of Ursa, a little bit of Azula, and see what a sort of character like that, who is like got element from the other kind of Fire Nation kind of characters who are involved in that family line. That'd be cool to see. And then plus to give Mako just a romance that isn't going to be overly drama focused. And I think there's some cool ways to do it where you play off the fact that they have set him up as having had problems with romances, where like maybe he thinks he is hitting it off with her, but he holds back from ever trying to start a relationship, and everyone's kind of wondering why. And you have that emotional scene where he has to admit, where like, all my other relationships have gone really badly in the end. I don't want to start one up if it's just going to mess up again. And the way I'd do it would be that I'd use Korra and Asami to be the ones to sort of like push him into like going for the relationship and helping him get this relationship. That'd be I think the perfect way to just fully smooth things out and fix the weird relationship he has with Korra and Asami, of them pushing him and helping him in this relationship where like they've maybe seen the chemistry between Honora and Mako, but they push him past the awkwardness around it, and they hit it off, because that'd be a nice thing. I'd like to see Mako just in a relationship like this. Plus, it'd allow us to get to know the princess of the Fire Nation at this point a bit more. Plus, we get to explore the Fire Nation and so on. I think that would be really, really cool to see. And yeah, so there's I think 3 obvious things, and what they all do together is they play off like the strengths of the character, where you're using his intelligence, his detective skills, his bending prowess, as like he would absolutely stand out as being a notable chief of police, where borderline just his reputation of who he is kind of would almost scare criminals in a way. That's the aura that kind of Lin kind of has with how tough she is. Mako, I think, would have that as well, just because most of the criminals potentially would know that he was previously part of the Triple Threat, know who trained him, and now here he is as the big guy in charge. I think that would fit perfectly to give him this like respected position in the city. There's always that emotional backstory arc to play off when we haven't really delved into it all that much. That would be pretty interesting. And again, I didn't say it earlier on, but you could always incorporate the rest of Mako's family into that, where like, imagine what the family would think if suddenly the people who killed, like Grandma Yin, for instance, the person who killed her son, how she would feel about this, and Mako hunting this person down. There's a lot of potential in that arc. And then the more romance arc is just something I think, given that the character has in a way suffered for the romance, like just look at Remembrances and the way that the writers choose to recap Mako's story in the show. It is making fun of him, blaming all of the mistakes in the romances on him. I think it makes sense to finally commit to giving an endgame romance for Mako, and just have it be this nice thing of getting to see Mako in a relationship, and it not be this hugely problematic, issues all over the place thing. Plus, we get to explore the Fire Nation royal family, what we've always wanted to see in Korra, that we've been teased so many times with, but haven't got a chance to see. And I think there's potential for the comics to completely cover all of this. I don't think any of this feels too out of line that it would never happen. I think the Fire Nation is somewhere we have to visit. The Turf Wars to a degree is already like kind of crime, triad, gang focused. So having a flashback arc related to that stuff, I don't think is too crazy. So they're my basic ideas for the character and where they'd go. And I think immediately, just that stuff adds so much extra to the character. So they're my thoughts on Mako and kind of the kind of pros and cons of the character, and where they've kind of made a mistake with him with the writing and where they need to go. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts on Mako are. What do you think they should do with Mako going forward to give him more development, give him more focus, and so on? I suppose the other thing is that I think he's still currently injured in Turf Wars. I'd like to see like him healed up pretty much by the end of Turf Wars. I'd hate for that to be something that just kind of follows him for like multiple comic arcs. I think we have to get him back into action sooner rather than later, and I think one comic series is enough to keep him injured. But yeah, they're my thoughts. In the comments, let me know your thoughts. But that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.